everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Pardon My Noggin. I'm your host, CK Sims, and today we are joined by award-winning and best-selling author Marie McKenzie, and her book is called Things That Keep Me Up at Night. And she's also the founder of the International Sexual Assault Recovery Institute, where she is a sexual assault recovery practitioner. Did I get
Coach.
that right?
Coach.
Coach, okay. So welcome, Marie.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, me too. It is definitely my pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping that your story can inspire a lot of people that will hear this podcast or see even some of the promo bits from this podcast.
Yeah, that's our hope.
So let's talk about your book first. Things That Keep Me Up at Night. I'm like, just the title alone is very like, I want to pick that up and read it, right? When did you write the book?
I wrote that book in 2021.
21, okay.
Yes.
And what we're going to get into this, but I do believe that the book covers a specific period in your life and how it may have shaped who you have become today. We head back to where the book starts off a little bit and kind of give our listeners some idea of Marie McKenzie's roots.
Yes. 2021, I entered a 30-day writing challenge. And that's where I wrote my first book, my memoir, Things That Keep Me Up at Night, in which I share my journey from childhood sexual abuse to becoming a thriving, successful registered nurse. My journey began at 11. Okay. I was sexually assaulted by a family member in broad daylight in a house where there were many other adults and children. I did not disclose when it happened. I disclosed to one of my aunts when I was in my 40s, and she had already passed by the time I went public. So I don't think she shared it with anyone. The first time I shared was a few months before I wrote the book. I was invited to a podcast to speak about my role as a sexual assault nurse examiner, because that's one of the things I do as a registered nurse. And during that podcast, it just came out. I disclosed in that podcast. I hadn't planned it. It just came out. We were talking about sexual assault. And I disclosed. I shared the episode with family and friends. Of course, they were shocked because no one knew at the time. And then a few months later, my book came out. And then the amazing thing was I heard from other family members and friends about their journey, their experience with being sexually assaulted. And they too had kept quiet. And, you know, children of sexual abuse remain quiet for different reasons. Some were threatened, some were afraid, some don't want to bring shame on the family. You know, they want to protect their parents. Why? I don't know. But, you know, when an adult crosses a line sexually with a child, that changes a child's world. The way you think about yourself, the way you think about others, it's totally, you know, the trust is broken because these are the people who are supposed to help to protect you most of the times, because 85 to 90% of childhood sexual assault victims know their perpetrators. So it's not the stranger danger that, you know, we all were taught about when we were growing up. Yeah. So I wrote the book and I heard from others who had the similar experiences, and people were opening up and sharing their stories like, Marie, if you can do it, I can do it. So that inspired me. Additionally, as a registered nurse, I cared for victims in the emergency department and also in the community setting where I worked with victim services as a sexual assault nurse examiner.
Yes, and I saw that actually. As I've had the privilege of meeting several SANE nurses. I did a very short stint. I think it was like 8 years ago now, with the Sexual Assault Crisis Prevention Center.
Right.
And learning the statistics and the type of work that a SANE nurse does,
Yes.
that was hard for me. And I'm not afraid to admit that I found that to be too cumbersome for my mental health, right? So in life, I'm a huge proponent for protecting women, protecting children, speaking about it, holding a platform. But working in that field, I think one of two things would have happened. I would have went down a really black hole that I could never have gotten out of, or I would have ended up in jail.
And some have.
Because
Yes.
I get angry, right?
Yes.
I have
Yes.
anger towards men who hit women or people who hurt children.
Yes.
If some sort of primal rage comes out, and it's just not healthy for me.
Yes.
When we look at, I want to pop back to when you were 11, and we're not digging too deep, because I think I really want people to go and purchase the things that keep me up at night. It's definitely it's going to be a book that I'm going to be reading in the very near future.
Okay.
You had mentioned that you were in a house with other adults. It was broad daylight.
Oh, it's broad daylight.
And there was other children present.
Not within the same room where it happened.
But
they were in the house, so anybody could have walked in at any time. That day, one of my aunts was giving birth, and it was her husband who was sitting beside me. Yes, it was her husband. Yes.
You said, oh gosh, now things are clicking in my head. You said you told an aunt. Was the aunt that you told?
No, not the same aunt.
Not the same one.
They're sisters, though, my mother's sisters. And that was when I was in my 40s.
Your 40s.
Yes.
So, obviously, you got threatened when you were 11 years old.
Say that again?
Obviously, he threatened you.
No, he didn't.
He didn't?
No, he did not.
So, what do
I was just muted.
Which I mean, that's a trauma, absolutely.
Yes, but, I was just muted.
Was it sort of and this is, I have goosies because I'm thinking the weight of that on an 11-year-old, that's so heavy, right? Something that you was constant with you every day until you finally told someone when you were 40, or was it something that you buried?
It was buried. It was over time. It was buried. Yes.
And when you did come out and I understand what you're saying too, you didn't plan on telling anybody on a podcast.
No.
But throughout the conversation, it just sort of organically came out.
Yes.
Are those individuals still alive? From
the podcast?
From the book, for the person who...
Oh, yes, he is still alive. Still married to my aunt. He is a sexually assaulted other female in the family and community. It's an open secret. Everybody knows. He has never been held accountable.
No justice brought against him whatsoever.
No justice, because nobody spoke up. One person said to me after she read my book, "Oh, I wish you had told me so I could offer you support." And I didn't say to her, but you knew about other members of the family who he sexually assaulted. Those children did not get any support. Those children, they didn't speak up, but the adults knew.
The rage, right? So,
yes.
Man is a perpetrator against multiple children within the family.
And community.
And you're indicating that the other adults were aware to some degree.
They were aware, fully aware.
Fully aware, okay.
Yes. His wife was aware.
Did nothing to intervene or protect?
No, nothing to intervene and protect. And that's how it was then in the community, in the home.
Trade?
Oh, absolutely.
And,
because if there were conversations surrounding this, then I probably wouldn't have been molested. My younger sister after me and other children. So there was the adults who were supposed to protect us just didn't.
To stay, no accountability,
No
just swept under the rug, sort of
accountability to this
didn't
day.
happen, sort
Yep.
of type thing.
Not to my knowledge.
I have to ask, how leave you feeling?
Sometimes angry, especially now that I work so closely with the community of survivors, and I see how badly some survivors are struggling many, many years later, because this totally changes your life. And you can have therapy, coaching, and you feel fine, you're living great for years, and then suddenly a trigger happens, because it can come from out of the blue.
Yep.
Yes. And this person is walking around scotch-free, it seems, Yeah. And this happens in many families. Let's keep it in the family, push it under the rug. It happens in churches and schools, in the homes. Yes.
Why it's so important, I think, for children to have conversations, not just stranger danger, as you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, but like autonomy of your body, right?
Exactly.
Like, and what that looks like, and what it might look like if somebody were to touch you inappropriately, all of that sort of thing. Like, that needs to be such a core part of our early childhood education.
And open, continuous conversation, and use proper names for body parts.
Absolutely.
Use a correct name. Yes.
We're looking at, people who have had this happen to them, and then, later in life, they've gone through the stages, they've gone through they've gone through therapy, they've living productive lives, but then they get triggered. And anybody who's experienced trauma does know what that, what that's like. It could be a normal Tuesday afternoon, and you might be going to get an ice cream, but something is going to happen that triggers you and sends you down a rabbit hole spiraling. And has that happened to you?
Not recently. I've spoken to married women who instinctively pull away from their husbands after 15 years. And it's like, the husband is wondering, what is this? She recognizes what it is.
Yeah.
But that can be very traumatic for both, especially the spouse who was sexually assaulted, because now she is thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Am I going to get the divorce? Is this going to be something that ends my marriage? Yes.
Complicated.
It is.
Trauma, and especially at this level. Yes. This sort of sense of just betrayal, right? That you would have experienced, your little sister would have experienced, other people in your family, anybody that this happens to, and a parent knows, and they don't protect you. There's that level of betrayal. This is going to totally affect how you measure your worth as a human. You know what I mean? Like, self-esteem, the whole thing.
Yes, and it does, until you do the work to overcome that.
When did you start the work?
It wasn't until years after I became a nurse, years into my nursing career, caring for other survivors, encouraging them, working with organizations and people who support sexual assault survivors. Then I develop and learn about some of the tools and resources available that I use to apply it to myself. Because I had suicidal thoughts, depression, overeating, unhealthy lifestyle, promiscuity, you name it. I didn't do drugs, because that's some of the outlets that people may use to cope. Drugs, alcohol, sex, food, totally shut down, or being angry. It's different people react different ways.
So we've talked about 11 and how it changed you. Did it happen ever again? Was it just at 11, or was it
with him just that one time? But there were other incidences.
Teens?
In high school, there were incidences. There were being grouped on the bus to school by older men, Yeah, I have. Yes, I wrote about some in the book, but yes, where I grew up in Jamaica, and it was pervasive. Yes.
Okay, and I apologize that any of this has happened
Oh
to
no,
you
that's
in your
fine.
life, and I wish it hadn't.
Yeah.
But what I do love about your story, um, and here's something I'm struggling with, and I'm gonna share because I like to be vulnerable, right? I know how much it annoys Black women to be called strong, right?
Hmm.
Because I hear all the time that women don't want to be referred to as strong. I am not strong.
I don't
I am
mind being called strong. I
okay.
am strong now and courageous. I wasn't always that way.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure that I'm not offending you, right? And
No.
I'm very much in tune with like everybody has a different story and they feel a different way. So,
Yes.
um, how did you have the strength? What got you through high school? What got you through these experiences? What got you through even, you said you were in Jamaica. Did you go to university in Jamaica? Did you come to the
No, I did
US?
high school in Jamaica. I went to university in in the United States.
Okay. Did the abuse stop after you left Jamaica?
With that one person was just at one time.
In high school? Like, was there any other incidents after this?
Just with one of the footballers that attempted to rape me in high school in broad daylight in front of other students who laughed. Nobody
Do,
came to my aid. I
is this
was able to escape, but nobody came to assist me, and everybody saw.
you can't even say though that this is just like a Jamaican thing because this is not just
No,
a Jamaican
it's
thing.
happened. It happens
It's
everywhere. It
everywhere,
happens
even
all
the
over.
US.
It's just a culture. I don't even know how to describe this systematic callous casual way most people view sexual assault.
Yeah.
It
And the
saddens. It's
victim blaming because
and
we
victim
all,
blaming, victim
yeah,
shaming.
yeah,
It's her fault. It's his fault. She was wearing a short skirt. She was inebriated. Yes.
yeah. So you came to the US, you registered in school, you got your nursing degree, and you
Yes. I always
started.
wanted to be a nurse.
What was the pull? Like, what was the call for nursing for you?
My aunt, my idol in Jamaica, she was a nurse, and I spent so many hours at the hospital with her. So I always idolized her, and I wanted to be just like her. So I was
And was
really
this the
happy when I got
aunt
to do that. That's
that you
that?
told?
No, this is a different aunt.
Different aunt, okay.
Yes.
And I love I love that story. So like, there's like a little bit of a happiness there, right? Like you had someone to look up to.
Yes. There was a
So was
lot
it?
of happy.
There was a lot of happy
There
in
was a
your
lot of
life.
happy. Yes.
Confusing though, isn't it?
It
Wouldn't that be
is
confusing?
confusing, isn't it? A child shouldn't have to go through that. Children should be safe, especially at home,
Yeah,
but it's not always that. And sometimes, even when the parents do everything to protect the child,
it still happens.
something still happens,
Yeah.
because you can't see them 100% of the time. So, however, if the parents are a good safety net, then it's more than likely that child will be safe.
So you had sort of a tragic, traumatic childhood experiences, but you also had happy childhood experience.
Yes, I have lots of
Mem-
happy memories.
Good. That's that's wonderful. I'm very
Yes,
happy to hear that.
yes.
When you moved to the U.S., how did life change for you when you went to university and
I'm sorry, say that again.
when you moved to the U.S. and went to university and started to get your nursing degree? How did life change for you?
Well, I got to live my dream of becoming a registered nurse associated with different people, because it's a different profession now in healthcare, something that I love, navigating the body and learning how things work in the body, caring for patients. I love people. I love to care for people, especially elderly and children. And then when sexual assault survivors, victims come into the space, then that opened another, it opened my eyes, because it brought me back to what happened to me. And at first it was kind of probably, I should say, traumatic, because
Mm.
then the memories started coming back, but then rewarding in the sense that I could care for survivors of sexual violence.
How does one do that though? How does one like? And this is my thing. I think I mean I kind of know the answer because like I have some trauma. Nothing. There's no. Nothing happened to me like it has happened to you. Um, However, my thought there is when you say this, right? I imagine someone who has a gaping wound that is bleeding out, being to care and tend to a victim of circumstance that they've shared. How do you work? How does that happen? Especially
Because
when the trauma, like when the memories came flooding back and all. How do you move to that space?
because it's, in a sense, it is you giving what you wish you had gotten at the time when you went through your trauma. So it's therapeutic in a sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does actually. Would you say
Yes.
almost healing?
Yes. So it's almost as if I was healing myself through helping others to start their healing.
It's fascinating that you said this because last year I was on Instagram and I saw a post like a reel or whatever. And so it was a young woman and she was saying, "Do you know that right now you are exactly the person that you as a child needed?"
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
really resonated with me
Wow.
in that
Right?
moment. And I thought about it and I'm like, I'm open, I'm accepting, I'm warm, I'm compassionate, I'm all of these that's a brag, but all of the wonderful things that me as a kid needed so badly
Yes.
to have that unconditional love and acceptance from, right?
Yes. Yeah, that is
So,
so true. I wish I had me when I was a child. Now that you said that.
well, because and interesting enough, you would have said something.
Yes.
You
Yes.
would have held that person accountable.
Accountable. Yes. I would have. I would have.
Started out as a registered nurse. You didn't start out as a sexual assault nurse examiner. So you had
No.
to at some point take that step to say, okay, now I'm going to become
Yes.
a sane and do this work specifically. Talk
Yes.
about what that looked like.
Well, initially in the emergency room, you assist the physician. They do the exam and you help with the specimen collection. Then in 2014, one of the nurses at the hospital where I worked brought the program into our hospital and asked if there was anyone who was interested. And I'm like, I went to the meeting to get all the information to see what it entails. And I was like, sign me up. And I got the training, and you go through like a 40-hour training, then you get certified on speculum examination. I was fortunate to be trained by the physicians in the emergency room. And then we go back for a practicum where we practice speculum examination on live people, real people too. Yes. And learn about evidence collection, documentation, maintaining chain of custody, and communicating with survivors, interviewing them. So since 2014, I've been able to do that independently. I've been to court to testify when the cases come up. And I'm happy to say my last case, the perpetrator was sentenced to life in prison.
Me happy,
Yeah,
right?
I was so overjoyed.
Think the person who did what they did to you should be also in prison, as far as I.
Absolutely.
However, it would appear as if no one cares to put him there, or
Right.
no one has enough to be able to put him individually. When you're in these courtrooms and you're testifying on behalf of these victims, the sentencing is given. Do you get any sort of feeling from that? Like, does it make you angry? Does it make you, I think it makes you happy from what you said, but like, is there
Yes.
ever a moment where you're like, I want my justice, or does seeing this happen for all of these victims that you help sort of placate the fact that, I might not have gotten my justice, but they're getting theirs?
I never put myself there.
Never? Okay.
No, I do. It's like I try not to I don't focus on that.
So
When
it's
I'm there for
something.
the victims, I'm there for them, and I'm happy when they get justice, because it doesn't always happen.
No, I know.
Oh, there's just a fraction of the cases that go to court. Not many of the perpetrators end up in jail. And just to think that only a small amount of victims report.
Mm-hmm.
So sexual assault is, I think, the most underreported crime.
But also, I think you would be correct.
Yes,
There's
it's
so many people who just don't speak up. They don't say.
yes.
And there's so many people also that do report, but are,
Yes,
just
either
pushed
by the
off to the
law
wayside.
or
Not,
the family. Yes, family and
yeah.
friends, they'll shun them. Don't
Uh,
believe you. Yes,
yeah. So that's the part too, right? Like,
yes,
there's so many things stacked against a sexual assault survivor that, we typically know based on our conversation that only a sliver of what goes to court actually gets prosecuted and
yes,
sent to prison. So you have that. Then you have the burden of proof, right? You
yes,
have to have, after being violated, you have to go through evasive sort of procedures to collect the
yes,
specimens and all of that stuff.
yes.
And then there's
Which takes a
shame.
lot of courage.
So much courage, like
Yes,
so much courage. And this is why it infuriates me as a human being that when someone comes forward and they make a statement that they were assaulted, I don't believe them.
yes. There
Now,
is
I'm
a
not saying that most people don't or most people do. What I'm saying is that I do see a shift here where people are
yes,
starting to accept that
yes.
this
There
is
is a
their
big
truth.
shift. Not big enough, but there is a turn.
Really. So,
There's a documentary on Netflix about Victim Suspect. I think that's the title. This young lady who was sexually assaulted and reported, and she was arrested.
yes, I've seen this.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's fascinating because
yes.
she was
He
fascinating.
was the victim. Yes,
Yeah. And I remember watching that and like seething in anger.
I can admit. Yes, I
Like,
was
just
like
like, are you
livid.
kidding me?
I
Like,
was
really?
livid. I'm like, what? Yes,
And so, like, that's what needs to change. So for anybody listening at home or watching at home, sane nurses are typically responsible for the rape kits. I don't know
yes,
why I air quoted that, but the rape kits that we
yes.
we talk about that will go on a shelf in storage somewhere. There's a backlog. Is there still a backlog in New York on?
No, because in 2015 that changed, and there were steps put in place that states must follow and implement. So I live in Florida, and I am happy to say Florida's cleared all the backlogs. They are testing current kits. There is now a system where the victim can track the kit. It's entered in a system, and they're given a QR code where they can follow up and yes, the status of their kit. Yes.
Wow. Okay,
So
so there's
things
been a
have
lot of
changed. Yes.
progress in that sort of
Yes.
department.
Yes.
Um,
And
but there's a statute of limitations in the U.S. No?
I don't remember exactly. There are some states where there are some changes, and I don't remember off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay. It's just one of those things, right? Because one of my favorite shows of all time also is Law and Order SVU.
SVU, yes. And
And
their episodes are ripped from the headlines.
yeah, and I watch an episode and then I'll go Google
Oh, you do?
and find out like what was that show based off of, right?
Yes,
Like, and
yes,
they have a really great way of bringing information out in a visual way to show the impacts of survivors.
yes.
There's one episode where when a victim went to the police, but the police just
brushed her off
and didn't even record the complaint.
Yep.
And this stuff happens, and
it happens more than you think.
it's mind-boggling to me.
Yes.
It's mind-boggling to me. So did you ever go to therapy?
No. A lot of the work that I've done on my own.
Done it through
organizations. I gather tools. Yes.
Yeah. So it's
real tools. Yeah.
So, and it's interesting. I've gone to therapy a lot in my life, which it's very great. But I also went and studied counseling psychology, and that is a huge reason as to how I was able to change my life and turn it around.
Yes.
Because you understand the whole holistic concepts.
Yes, and how the mind works and changes due to trauma and things you can do. Because the behaviors that we display after trauma, we learn them.
Yes.
We can unlearn them.
Absolutely.
Or you develop tools to, like when we are triggered, to not let the trigger overwhelm us.
Absolutely. And I think that one thing we do get to see a little bit more of now is a lot of doctors, like GPs, are becoming trauma informed.
Yes.
To recognize signs of traumatic relapse and all of that sort of stuff.
It's huge in healthcare system, because you don't want to re-traumatize the survivor.
Exactly. But that's growth and progress.
A lot of progress being made in that area. We need
so much more, though. We need so much more.
So much more, especially in keeping the conversation going 365, 24/7. We need to get comfortable, because so many people are uncomfortable even hearing the word sexual assault.
Well, it's interesting because on this particular podcast, when I put it out, I have to put trigger warning.
Yes.
Because it's going to trigger people.
Yes.
And they need to know, and we don't want to re-traumatize people.
Yes.
Unless it's a consensual, they know what they're getting into when they're watching this episode. But you're absolutely correct in the sense that the conversation has to continue happening. And it has to become so normalized that it's like me asking you about the weather.
Yes. Because it's like I was silent for so long, and once I started talking, I'm not shutting up. It's just like, I can't shut up. It's just so important. It means that's much to me to make people aware, to bring awareness to this topic and let people get comfortable hearing it and talking about it. There are too many bystanders. There are too many adults watching by while children are being sexually assaulted in the home, in the school, in the churches. My God, who is there to protect the children of the adults who are looking on and not doing anything? Well,
and it's a collective sort of dismissal of what's actually happening.
Exactly. Sexual assault does not happen in a vacuum. It's a
that's been studied, right? Like bystander effect. People don't say anything because they think someone else is going to say something.
Exactly. Or I don't want to get involved. Yeah.
But what if I'm wrong?
But what if you're right? Yes.
And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, I think this is the other part of it too. The other side of the coin is that if someone is wrongfully accused, then we need to let them go on with their lives.
Right.
Maybe we saw something that we thought was something and it wasn't, and it was investigated and they were cleared of all charges.
Right.
We also as a community and collectively have to let that go and let them live their lives.
Yes.
But that's something so hard to come back from once you're accused as well. But
it is.
That should not take more importance than the child.
Yes.
Who is the victim here.
Yes. Right? Because this affects the victim for the rest of his or her life.
Yes. I want to ask, has it affected your relationships in your life?
Not anymore. Initially, I had commitment issues. Yeah. I went to a period where I was promiscuous. Yes, but over time, I were able to work that out. But it was bad initially.
Of course. Of course. I can only imagine.
Yes.
Let's talk about the International Sexual Assault Recovery Institute and being a coach. So, like,
Yes.
this journey, it seems to have started, like, even more so this chapter of your journey once you went on a podcast one day and opened up about your story.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
So the Institute came many years after that because I had people reaching out to me, sharing their stories. I had friends who were married and struggling with intimacy in their relationships, acquaintances. People were just reaching out to me what to do about this, asking for advice. So I took my nursing knowledge and the tools and other training that I received so I could help women overcome their sexual assault triggers and find intimacy in their relationship.
Look like.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So,
So,
like, I mean, okay, I won't pretend to know what a trigger for someone who has been sexually assaulted is.
yes.
For anybody who is listening or watching who has maybe buried deep
Mm-hmm.
this
So,
memory or whatever.
yeah, and it shows up in different forms to different people. Like a spouse who will pull away from her spouse or his spouse. They've been married for years, sitting on the couch, he's reaching for her and she pulls away. Now that's a confusion for the spouse who was all in yesterday or earlier today, and then suddenly she's putting away. Maybe arguing with her spouse for no apparent reason, lack of trust, failure, not wanting to be intimate with your spouse, having difficulty developing meaningful relationships, difficulty setting boundaries, struggling to take even loving and taking care of yourself, feeling
Okay.
ashamed of your body. So there, a lot of different relationship with food, getting sweating and heart racing when you're ready to leave the home because you're being triggered. Your body, your mind is taking you back to a place that you don't want to go.
Or when this is happening, so say one of the people who is sitting on the couch with their spouse and the spouse goes to reach for them and they pull away. Are those people aware of in that moment
Some
why
are,
they're pulling away?
some are, but some in the moment do not, because this is coming from out of the blue. Because
Well, that must be very
some people that
confusing.
may be their first time being triggered, so they don't recognize what it is. Yeah, the few people I've spoken to, they're aware. They're, problem aware, so they know what it is, and initially may not know what to do about it or how to overcome.
See that being such a complicated situation to try and even maneuver, right? Like, we know that human beings have the capacity to do great things with their mind.
Yes.
And compartmentalizing and completely erasing and burying a memory is one of those things. And it
Yes.
happens a lot for children.
Yes.
And so, you're looking at someone who, say, we'll use 40 because you said that earlier, but someone who, went about their lives, got out from the situation, started living a normal life. Maybe they had got married, they had children, things all of a sudden. And then out of nowhere, strange behavior happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they stop coping the same. And they stop reacting the same. And they start experiencing physical manifestations of something that they don't remember because it's so buried.
Right.
And it's almost like they have a disease, but they don't know where it's coming from. You say as a sane nurse and then in your sexual assault recovery coach to someone who would be experiencing something like that?
First, I get someone on a call and we, discuss where they are. If someone comes to me with that, we explore where they are, how it affected them, how long it lasted, And we develop a plan specific to that person based on answers.
A therapeutic plan working
Yes.
on. Okay, what would you say to listeners right now who may not be knowing that they're having a triggered response from a sexual assault or a buried memory or something like that?
Seek support.
Seek support
Yes.
and like go to a therapist or go to a doctor. Which do you think is more effective in that area?
Whichever one they can get to quicker, because depending on how much coping skills they have already built up, they may be totally overwhelmed or, being able to cope to a certain point. So you first want that person to be safe. Yes.
Yes.
Some people will have to go to the emergency room.
That's fair. And I think that's great advice too. Whoever you can get to first.
Yes.
Not the same, but after the pandemic, I think the world all went through some sort of trauma in the pandemic, right?
Yes.
And in my day job, I am a leader and I have teams. And after the pandemic, and it sort of ended and things started to resume normal, people just assumed that they're going to be normal again. And everything's going to go back to the way it used to be. And I remember having a conversation with a team member, and they were like, she said to me, she's like, stuff really pisses me off now. Like, I'm angry a lot. Like, just the other day, this is happening. And I'm like, I don't get angry like that. And like, I'm listening to her, I'm giving her space. And then I say to her, I'm like, did you or did you not just go through a 2.5 year global pandemic? Right. Where for periods of time where we truly didn't know what the state of our world would look like. Yes. And she's like, yeah, but everybody went through it. I'm like, I know, but everybody processes things differently. So my words to her was, you're not going to function and show up the exact same way you did pre-pandemic, did you did post-pandemic. And a lot of that sort of burnout manifests in people in many different ways. Yes. Things that we might used to have found joy in, we may not find joy there anymore. Yes. Or things that used to skills, like, for instance, pre-pandemic, I had done the work and I was able to go out and go anywhere and have minimal anxiety or upset. Post-pandemic, I could barely leave my house. Yes. And I was like, okay. And I was mad at myself because I was like, I've done the work. What is this? But you have to show yourself kindness and work. So exactly. I like that. Show yourself kindness. So yeah. So if you're at home and you're watching and you're listening and you're experiencing these things, or anything that's being said today is sort of kind of not colliding with you in a way that doesn't feel sort of comfortable to someone, whether it be your GP, whether it be a psychologist or a therapist or a friend, even. Like, we have a lot of resources that can be helpful around us. Yes. So go talk to someone. Help is available. Help is available. How would someone get in touch with you? sarecoverygift.com. And then I'll send them all the information. Yes. sarecoverygift.com. Do you operate nationally within the USA? International. They can get me anywhere. It does say international sexual assault. Yes. I'm sorry. So let's just say somebody wants to talk to Marie. Okay. Because Marie has been through it and she has been able to successfully work through the trauma, heal from the trauma, her truth, speak her truth, and then take that truth and use it to help others. They could go to sarecoverygift.com. Yes. And be from anywhere in the world and connect with Marie McKenzie and talk about, have a session, maybe Like, do you do like discovery sessions, like a consultation where we figure
Yes,
out?
first I get the person on a call. We, get to know each other, where they are, assess what their needs are, or even if I'm the right person for them,
Fair.
and then go from there. Yes.
So if you're at home and you want someone who seems very approachable, by the
She
way,
is. She is.
from where I'm sitting, you seem very approachable. You have a lovely disposition and you have such kind eyes. I'm not
Thank
sure if
you.
anyone's ever told you that before, but you have such a kindness in your eyes.
Thank
And
you.
I find that to be fascinating, but also this goes and reiterates my assumption that the people who have faced the greatest adversity in their life are often the kindest and most compassionate,
I have
right?
seen that a lot.
And
Yes.
what a story. Everybody that, like, I'm literally, when we're done here, I'm going to go and order things that keep me up.
Thank
Like I
you.
said, the title itself is catchy, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure the story is going to be quite hard to swallow and work through, but I want to I want to read the story. And that's why we didn't get into a lot of details today, because I want people to read that story as well. Guide women in conquering their sexual assault triggers and rekindling intimacy within their relationships. I think that that's a really important thing as well. Because what a confusing time for anybody who does get triggered and
Yes.
has to go through all of this healing. Other side of it too, you get triggered, but then your spouse, how do they respond to your story and your revelation and truth and
Yes. And
all of those?
especially if they were totally unaware of your past experience. So,
I imagine how like re-traumatizing that can be for
yeah.
somebody to remember you come out and you tell them, and then your spouse has their reaction, which they're entitled to react,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's not always going to be supportive. There's going to be shock there. There's going to be all kinds of different emotions.
Yes.
So I love that the goal is to conquer their sexual assault triggers and rekindle the intimacy within their relationship.
Yes. And
Um,
intimacy, a lot of people mistake intimacy for sex. That's
no, it's
more
not.
than, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it can be sex,
Yes.
but it's
But it's so
all of the
much more.
things. It's
All the things,
the
love,
light
respect,
touches and the hugs and the respects and then the
support.
cute notes and
Yes.
things like that. Yes.
Yes.
So you collaborate with multiple organizations that are dedicated to um, those affected by diverse traumas.
Yes.
And when you say diverse traumas, what do you mean by that?
Like sexual assault. I'm a board member of the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence.
Okay.
I work with homeless organizations. I'm a saint for the Central Florida Victim Services, and they also work with survivors of, physical assault, different traumas, not just
Because
sexual assault.
it's compounding, isn't it? We talked about this already.
Exactly.
Because,
Exactly.
like you said, people go through the abuse, they get assaulted. It could be as a child, it could be even later than that. But
Hmm.
then often people don't, you're a success story because people don't always end up where you are. They could end up in the streets,
They
they could
don't.
end up non functional, turn to drugs and
Yes.
alcohol, all of those things. So it becomes a compounding trauma
Yes.
and situation that I'm happy that there are people like you and there are organizations out there working to
Yes.
help with that.
Yes. A lot of victims are also victims of sex trafficking.
Another one that blows my mind.
Yes, that's mind-boggling.
It's
A $156 billion plus a year industry. Yes, billions.
it's mind-boggling, Marie, for
Yes,
me to think
it's
about.
yes
I
makes
want
my hair stand up,
yes, well,
and I don't
I
have much.
Neither do I. But I watch documentaries all the time. Rather a documentary than a movie, to be honest. But
Yeah, me too.
when I watch these things, for me, it's really hard to process this can happen to like everyday normal people. Your
Everyday
neighbor,
normal people.
the girl at the coffee shop, the boy at the fast food place. Like,
Yeah, the mother at the supermarket, the
yeah, like
mother running errands, the
it's
child going playing in the yard.
and it's just it is mind-boggling because
Just to think that a human can do that to another human.
that's the thing, right? That
Yes,
like and
that's
you for money, no less.
for money.
Right?
Yeah,
Like you value money more than you
on another
value that
human's life.
person's life
Yes,
and their just existence.
yes,
And anyway, could be like I said, that could be like 20 podcasts in a row that we could spend talking
yes,
about the atrocities that
yes,
are happening in our world.
yes. And
You
April is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month, and it's
what
also Child Abuse Prevention Month. So
perfect.
we were
So
meant to be talking in this
we are
month.
definitely so now this absolutely has to air in April.
Yes.
I've made the decision. We've got to move some things around.
Okay, good.
People like talk about it. We have an obligation as adults to protect children,
Yeah.
an obligation as human beings to protect other human beings.
Yes.
If you see something, say something. I don't want to get involved or obviously if you're fearing for your safety, you need to be cautious
Yes.
and all of those things, but we need to speak up more. We need
Yes.
to hold people accountable.
Yeah, we need to get
Um,
involved.
yeah,
The
we need
time
to
for
get in.
standing on the fence is long past. Remember, this affects all of us.
It does.
It affects all of us. And it's going to take us to solve this problem. Together we
I
can end this madness.
firmly believe that while your perpetrator didn't get justice in this lifetime, he'll get it in the next. My belief and my prayer. But it just took that sort of very ugly situation and turned it into something powerful
Yes.
that you are using to help others and you have been using. Like your
Yes.
adult life, you've been working to care for others.
Yes.
And I applaud you for being able to do the work through the trauma, get to a point where you can own your truth and talk about it so openly for other people to learn.
Yes. And I'll continue championing the cause and helping others.
Doing all of the incredible work that you're doing. One of the things that you had mentioned is in what your messaging is for other people is you had said you want them to know that they are not alone.
You are not.
What does that mean to you? Like, what do you really want to drive home with that?
That help is available. You're not the only victim, and help is available. Just reach out for support. If you're that woman out there pulling away from your spouse, arguing with your spouse, having problem setting boundaries, caring for yourself, communicating with your spouse, sarecoverygift.com.
I
Help
like
is
that.
available.
And you have Facebook and LinkedIn, and you have there's marielmckenzie.com as well. Twitter, which is now X,
Yes.
YouTube, and TikTok. And then I'll link all of these in the description for everybody so that they're going to be easy to find. You have a free guide?
Yes, the sarecoverygift.com. They'll get it there.
Okay, perfect. So there's a free guide there that they can get. Wonderful. I think you're amazing, to be honest
You're
with you.
amazing. Thank you for this opportunity.
This has been a great conversation, a sad conversation, but also a positive conversation. It's interesting how those two things can
Good,
exist
right.
at the same time. Be listening at home, like we said, reach out for support. You're not alone.
Yes.
And reach out to Marie McKenzie.
Yes. You're worthy of living a rich and meaningful life. Yes.
And with that, we're going to close. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Pod in My Noggin. And until next week, go out and live your wildest dreams.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.